I'd like to invite on the stage, firstly, Brad Langton, CEO of that amazing Expo that he tries to put on every year for No Vacancy and National Media. Brad, please put your hands together. Kristian Nicholls, Executive General Manager Bidding, Business Events Sydney. Kelly Maynard, Head of Distribution Development and Partnerships for Tourism Australia. And Blair Weir, Commercial Director of Hilton Sydney. Please welcome up on stage. Who was that? All right. Okay, now events are so important. Where are we in terms of the events recovering both internationally and domestically? Who wants to go first?
I can jump in.
Yeah, okay.
For those of you that are not familiar with Business Events Sydney, we're a not-for-profit funded majority by the New South Wales State Government, the City of Sydney, and about 150 private sector members, many of whom are here today. Our job is to attract international business events to Sydney and New South Wales. And during COVID, we got involved in the domestic market to help stimulate some demand there. So perhaps I can leave the domestic market to Blair and others, but internationally, we have 85 international meetings secured for Sydney from this year through to 2026. This year we have about 23 meetings scheduled to come in, attracting about 130,000 delegates, over 500,000 room nights through that. Some of those won't necessarily come through with full numbers, so we'll still be seeing hybrid meetings this year. But as with our last speaker coming from Singapore, we're seeing people travel now. There are some challenges, and we can probably touch on that. Next year, though, it's going to be one of the biggest international years for Sydney from a business events perspective. We've got 36 global meetings, many of those some of the biggest meetings in the world, attracting thousands of delegates. Yep. So, yeah, internationally, things are positioned well from the work we've done years ago.
I mean, is Australia still attractive? Kelly, yeah.
Definitely.
I mean, we love Australia, but yeah, is it still attractive?
Yeah,
because we've been closed off for so long. What's the perception out there?
Yeah, look, and just to give context to Kristian as well, I work in the business events team at Tourism Australia, so our role really is to drive demand and keep that consideration of Australia internationally. And we also have done some work in the domestic market because our international borders were closed. So internationally, I think we're positioned well. I think there's a, cautious optimism from our industry here, and I think, talking to customers in all of our key markets, Australia is perceived as safe and a destination that has handled the pandemic well. We are seeing really good, future business. As, Kristian said, for Sydney, the longer lead time nature of business events is, potentially some of the association congress events are bidding up to 10 years. We've got an international business events bid fund that's basically a subvention program, and we partner with industry like Business Events Sydney to help convert business for Australia, and we've had 60 wins so far with that program worth 467 million, and a number of those wins, I think we're up to 37, have actually been since our borders have been closed. So, the appetite is good. We've just launched some international new brand campaign to really try and keep that momentum going now that our borders are open. Yeah.
So the sentiment's still there. People want to come here.
Sentiment is really positive, and we think incentive, particularly from Asia and some of those other markets, we'll see before some of that longer lead time association business.
So is the demand pattern sort of mirroring pre-COVID or same, Blair?
Speaking from at the coalface hotel level, it's starting to mirror the patterns that we'd seen pre-pandemic. So you're starting to see October, November as being your peak months, and your winter months being slightly less in demand. Okay. So, but
do you think that'll change, or?
I don't think it will. We've got 1 or 2 months which stand out as need months, but it's looking very encouraging moving forward. And speaking, if you split international and domestic, international, we're starting to see those inquiries coming back for conferences that would just use our hotel alone. Particularly for 2023, but I'm even starting to get really short-term leads for smaller groups. I've got one coming for May of this year, which I was quite astounded with. Yep. But it's starting to come, and Q4 of this year, we're getting inquiries coming in from overseas as well.
Yeah, okay. In terms of putting events on and everything like that, I mean, Brad, you put a huge event on. Well, you do a few, don't you? Sorry, not just No Vacancy. We spoke the other week when we met on the Gold Coast, beautiful place to be. And you said that you did, was it the Design Expo in Melbourne? Or?
Yeah, architecture and design.
Yeah, and you had a rush of registrations, and even this one here, I mean, it's been consuming. I was sort of, I'm a digital agency owner, and this has been consumed because we still had speakers this morning pull out because of had close contact or COVID. I need a marketing panelist if anyone knows. So it's very challenging. But you said you had a big rush, and we had a rush. We had probably 70% registered in the last 5 days. But you said you had a couple of thousand register all at the last minute, or
About 6,000.
wow,
which makes it difficult as an organiser. So probably unlike long-term, 10-year forecast business, typically one-off events, we're a repeat business customer for ICC in Sydney, for Melbourne Convention Centre. By our scale and by Australian standards, we run large trade shows, but our challenge has been willingness for events to return. So you've got supplier side. I mean, an example here, you've got your suppliers outside here, and you've had a late hockey stick to sell tickets. So as an organiser who's for profit, that's very challenging to forecast 12 months out. And something that, I think is improving, but is a challenge.
Yep, okay. In terms of, so global meetings, obviously, is there anything last minute happening, do you think, or Blair, or any? I mean, is it people saying, okay, I want a conference 6 months? I mean, this conference is small, but we had a rush. I mean, we all going to start organising this in January. We usually organise this 9 months out because we thought, okay, the peak of COVID in New South Wales ago, I mean, imagine that. But for big global events, are you seeing anything really last minute?
So at a hotel level, no, we're not in what you would call global. Yes, we are seeing short lead inquiries starting to come in from overseas, but they're mainly corporate events, but they're not really big global events. It's sort of smaller.
Yeah, and what we're seeing, I mean, most of the business that obviously we've secured now, it's been secured, as in for this year, it's been secured 2, 3, 4 years ago, and a lot of that has been postponed through COVID, so it's putting a bit of a lot of events taking place in 22 and 23. We are, however, seeing lead time bookings. I mean, we had one coming out of India, a corporate, who was going to Moscow. They're now needing to look reasonably short term. To a destination, and Sydney ticks a lot of those boxes. A big challenge, though, for the international market, and particularly in the short term, is airline availability.
I was about to say airlines,
because the routes aren't coming back on
They're
yet.
not,
No, and I mean, a colleague was saying the other day, there was a 10,000 plus airfare business class from Sydney to Shanghai, one way. He was paying 2 weeks ago.
Really?
Yeah. So there's and obviously that varies across markets, and hopefully that airline supply comes back quickly. But it's key to the cost of an overall event internationally. Air capacity is a big factor, as are land costs. But if the routes aren't there, the premiums get charged.
It'd be interesting to see the panel after this. We've got some of the biggest corporate travel agents in Australia. And obviously Dean from AFTA as well. It'd be good to get a understanding, because that's key. If you don't have the air capacity, everyone was flying into Australia before. You don't have that capacity coming in, it's too expensive. You're not going to get those international as well. So
and it is starting to increase month by month. I think if we start to look at April and May, our team certainly track that and are working closely with the airports around the country and the state, territory, tourism organisations as well. So I think we're starting to see it pick up in certain destinations. And I think we're seeing some really short lead time business as well out of Asia, asking for quotes for 1,000 people for October, November this year. Some of our US customers for incentive travel being asked to quote now for travel within 60 days, and they're open to looking at, longer haul travel. So there is some positivity.
I was just going to add, risk propensity is a big thing to factor in, and so wearing the hat sitting up here as the person that actually books and runs events. And the last 2 years, I can tell you, not only do I have a booking for an event that's running in June, but I'm arguing with ICC to hold dates if there's going to be a COVID scare. So I'm blocking out the calendar and stopping other events from getting in there, which is a challenge. The ICC is, I've got 7 years of dates booked for some events, but I also want backup dates if something happens this year. And so I'm taking time out of the calendar. If you talk about that in a hotel occupancy mindset, I'm taking rooms out of the mix that I need, and as a client, they kind of have to give me that support. So that's creating some challenges as well in terms of calendar and availability, particularly with the big venues like Melbourne and Sydney convention centres. So probably something that most people don't factor in, but as the organiser, I need redundancy to be able to move.
Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about hybrid markets. I mean, the ongoing impact of virtual hybrid on domestic and international meeting attendance and events. I mean, do you think that's made an impact? I mean, I could see a lot of people hugging and kissing each other today because it's great to be back. But do you think hybrid will still continue, or?
I think it will, but I think it's going to that whole sort of half hybrid. Say if you were having a meeting that was 50% hybrid, 50% in-person attendance 2 months ago, it's getting less and less. The amount that's hybrid is getting less and less as you move forward. So I think it's still be there, but I don't think it's going to be as strong in demand for those type of events moving forward.
Everyone just wants to meet in person again.
I think so, yeah. But it will always be there. Like we heard people saying some things have changed forever, and I think that will be there for quite some time to come.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I'll just add to that there's obviously some big benefits from hybrid that weren't existing previously. People being able to access their community well beyond who would have been physically or economically being able to actually attend an event. We had an event at Blair's property just a few days ago, and we were able to beam in our offices from Singapore and New York, which would have been, it was harder to do previously. It happens very, very quickly now.
Yeah, we've got Sarah from TripAdvisor beaming in from Hong Kong live, and I think it's a thing too. What sort of business events are coming back? What sort of format?
Look, Kelly, do you want to go
I
first?
was just going to say, from a domestic perspective, we are tracking and have been doing domestic corporate sentiment research with corporate decision makers around the country, and we've done 7 waves of that over the last 18 months. And the most recent one we did in February, the appetite is certainly there. 7 out of 10 corporates said they wanted to just get on with it and actually do face-to-face events. 60% are willing to travel. So from a corporate perspective, I think the demand to actually restart face-to-face events is strong. It's probably more that association sector that is a bit more of a challenge.
I think obviously we started off this year, we had the Omicron wave, and that really impacted our revenues and bookings in Q1. But what we can see moving forward through the quarters, Q2, Q3, Q4, is demand is increasing. And we're getting some months in the future.
But we're going through a wave now. It's not affecting it, is it, really?
No, it's not affecting it. But we're moving forward, like in Q4, we've got one particular month where the ballroom is booked for almost every weekday.
Wow.
So we're reaching a point where we're getting inquiries, but people saying, I must conference with you, but we're going, well, unfortunately, our main plenary venue is not available.
Okay. Yeah. What's changed in terms of requirements and expectations for organisers of business events? I mean, have customers relaxed requests for strict COVID safety requirements in line with relaxation of COVID restrictions? Like, no one really had to check in today here, you know what I mean? We had to get everyone's name and register in the event system. That was about it. So,
I was thinking about that this morning because we attended a trade show, Get Local trade show, must have been 5 weeks or 6 weeks ago now, and every attendee did a rat test on the way in.
Really?
Yeah. A significant cost to the organiser, but it was at that tipping point, I guess, where there was still concern about transmission, and everyone has a different perspective, I think, or most people have a different perspective on that now, so that's certainly been a big change.
Yeah. An example of that is that Salesforce, probably 2 parts of this. Salesforce, the global CRM giant, is running their world tour in Sydney on Thursday. Their model is hybrid in that it's invite only to the 14,000 square metre exhibition at ICC. It's streamed around the country, but also they've encouraged their partners to run their own events. So you can go to a bar that's booked out with a big screen and run that. So that's a different model. But rat test on entry, it's a full process because their global risk propensity is so high. So I think depending on who the organiser is, that plays a big factor.
And I think what our international customers are saying they want really is that, clarity on COVID-safe processes and policies. And I think that's certainly important from a hotel perspective. What are you doing as a hotel that just gives them that level of confidence? And flexibility in terms and conditions on contracts is the other thing that we keep being told quite regularly that everybody's after.
Yeah, very interesting. mean, there's a lot of hoteliers here in the room, and one of the reasons why we wanted to do a panel session, I mean, what sort of advice can you give them in terms of, you know, running events? I mean, is there anything they have to do that didn't have to do in terms of, you know, from compliance, or what are people wanting? I mean, some advice. I mean, Blair, you run, or is it back to normal?
I think they're wanting safety measures, and they're wanting a company policy or hotel policy on what, and they want to know what you're doing in terms of providing safety and, I suppose, hygiene and cleanliness. But it really is up to each individual operator as to how strict they're going to be in terms of like rat tests beforehand, etc. One thing I've noticed is that obviously we had that brief, beautiful period last year in March, April, May, where we thought things were back to normal. And we noticed as you moved further away and you got further into the recovery, people became less concerned and they were less inclined to ask those questions about security, and we're noticing it again now. There are one or two exceptions. You'll find some operators, due to company policy, will be quite strict, but as you get further and further away from a major wave or
different
lockdown.
city to city? Like, you know, here in Sydney, you guys have gone through the wave. I mean, I live in Brisbane. I mean, we're sort of back to normal. Sydney is it, because I didn't have to check in anywhere, because when I last came down to Sydney, I had to have that app. I have not checked in anywhere, not even at the airport. Is it back to normal? I mean, or should we
I think it's like in Sydney, I'd say we're getting close to not that we'll ever go back to normal again, but it's getting more normal. I think in other markets, so for example, Perth, they're still very. I mean, I grew up in Perth, so I can just say this, like, all my family's over there, but they are a lot more. They're probably further behind us in terms of coming to terms with COVID and being more relaxed with it.
Adrian, I was just going to add, also from a hotel level, what you can do with your sales team is preach the good word. So often you're trying to give a business case to your booker to put the business case forward to the decision maker. So talk about events like this. Talk about how safe they've been operated. Talk about different models that the hotels have the ability to roll out COVID safe if you need it. Talk about different things that are taking place at breaks and bringing people together. But preach the good word of face-to-face meetings again, because sometimes you may need to give them some ammunition to get business events locked in.
I was going to, wearing the organiser hat, that the mindset has changed. If I went back 6 months ago, the biggest fear I had, I'll throw your example here into the mix, and that, 100 people got COVID at maximum occupancy. That's brand damage.
It's not going to happen.
That mindset as an organiser has changed in that there's a different acceptance. Everyone, and again, this is probably personal opinion, but everyone's got it. I know someone that's had it, and that has changed very quickly. Yeah. So I think that's important to note.
Yeah, no, it's very important. So any other advice to the hoteliers or trying to grab their show? I mean, I think you have to be out there more and work with your local business events council, I think, or a government organisation. Because I know a lot of governments around Australia are going to throw a lot of money to get that events, because if they can bring, a conference of 5,000, 10,000 people, even 1,000 to a regional city, that's a huge difference for them. So.
And we've just launched the last version of our domestic campaign, so event here this year, really trying to encourage that face-to-face. Corporates making that decision and actually committing. So you'll start to see some ads in some of the mainstream papers. But it's that confidence piece, as Kristian was saying. I think the more we can demonstrate that events are happening, and that's one thing we can help with from certainly a PR and content perspective. It's being able to show that events are happening here COVID safely. We can then use that, to show that confidence piece for international customers as well.
Yeah. I was going to add, you asked about advice, and this is going to sound odd coming out of my mouth, but as a hotelier, back yourself. Someone asked Craig earlier about cancellation policies. The venues that I've worked with have been extremely flexible over the past few years, and that's changing, and I accept that. And there are caveats to costs that Matt talked about, and so that's part of our business operating cost, and we forecast that. So, there's strict and then there's loose, and I think there's a middle ground now. As an organiser, we accept that. So I would back yourself in, particularly if you're you're an attractive venue that people want to be at. You should be able to back yourself in.
Yeah, I mean, there's one of our exhibitors, Protect Group. They insure events, and they haven't had not too many business, but now they're just going through the roof because people want that protection as well. Let's talk about rates. Are rates being charged at pre-pandemic levels, or they're not? Or Blair?
From a supplier point of view, we are exhibiting flexibility, is what I would say. And it is beginning to change, though, with the demand that we're seeing moving forward. Our rates are going back to more pre-pandemic levels. Certainly from a rooms perspective, we're starting to see a lot more strength in terms of ADR. And in terms of the rates we would charge for a DDP, we're in a month where we've got very high demand, as I said, where our ballroom is actually
Fantastic.
fully booked out for almost every weekday of the month. We are certainly charging full rate at pre-pandemic levels for that period.
In terms of the challenges with recruitment and retention in business event sector, I mean, well, I haven't brought up the topic because it will be talked about, staff challenges. I mean, but in that whole sector, is it a challenge or?
Do you want me to? Oh, this is my pet. Where do I begin? Look, let me break it down into two. So retention, from like most hotels, we had to make people redundant in the first year of the pandemic. We were very fortunate that we managed to maintain a core of very good team members. We lost a few more of those moving forward. But what we've been able to do is the people we have retained, we've recruited and promoted from within. So that's actually given that titles are important, and we've also been able to give them a pay rise. So we've kept this very excellent core group of employees. Staff benefits are very important, and that's something that's a hot topic of conversation within our hotel group.
What sort of mean staff benefits like?
Staff roommates. People are starting to travel again. These staff members are expecting to be able to get their staff room rates at sister properties around Australia and around the world.
That's a good idea,
So we're talking about those benefits. But that seems to be working well for us now. In terms of recruitment, that's a big challenge because as an industry, we have been scarred because of the stand downs that we implemented during 2020 and 2021. So moving forward, though, I think you just have to have a very good culture within your organisation so that word of mouth moves beyond your employees to people they know, and then you happen to recruit by...
I mean, the attractiveness of the international potential staff coming back in, is that going to make a difference? I mean, that's
Yes,
huge,
it will. Yeah, it will. And certainly look for even positions within my department in the hotel. I've looked at people from overseas already. So that's something that you have to keep your eye on as well. And you have to basically expecting that some perfect candidate out there exists. You have to drop that, and you have to look at what applications you might receive, and possibly, or look at someone who might have been working in a different area, and promote them to work within your area.
I mean, it's just same with us. I mean, with we sort of lost 80% of our business. Beginning COVID, we kept our key people, and that's probably the backbone to our organisation moving forward. I think anyone in the industry. But Matthew Cameron Smith said before that he's bringing some staff in from the Philippines, working with the government. That's great. That's fantastic. Because people up there have done it tough. There's some amazing people in Asia, especially in hospitality, in business events, in that area. That would be amazing. Would love to come down here. So.
But I think the final word on this is that you've got to create a great culture within your department or within your hotel. If you don't have that, then people won't stay. They're just going to go. And the days where leaders could throw tantrums and yell, they're gone.
No.
Yeah, I agree. It's that culture and that overall employee value proposition that Blair's talking to, and building from the base. Everyone's downsized. You've generally retained your best staff. It is really challenging though in the employment market. We're only a small organisation. We've got a few roles out there at the moment, and getting quality candidates is really tough. And the ask of those quality candidates, rem-wise, is 10-20% above what it was pre. So it's a really difficult market at the moment.
I think it's everywhere. I mean, we're trying to get web developers and digital marketers. It's just going crazy, people. So, but I think it's very important. I think working with government to try and get people to come back from overseas, back into Australia, make them attractive. Maybe an internship or something will solve that market. Because if you're saying all these big events are coming in, we need the staff in the hotels to challenge them. So, Cad.
And I was just going to say, working holiday makers is one of the first steps that the government has done, waiving the visa fees for working holiday makers. Tourism Australia is leading a campaign in some of our international markets, where that working holiday maker has traditionally been strong pre-COVID, just to try and get them those guys moving to come and help relieve the pressure a bit.
And I think staff benefits. I mean, okay, we're a digital agency, with offices in Brisbane, Sydney, Auckland, and Singapore back up there. I mean, we've kept our COVID days. We work in the office Monday, Tuesday, Thursdays. Wednesday, Fridays from home, and they love it. I think don't try and bring people in straight away 5 days or 6 days. I mean, people have had it easy at home, but I think, that's very important as well. So, yeah. Do you have any questions from the room at all? I mean, we've got some amazing business events people here. Any questions at all? Come on, someone's got a question. So, to Business Events Sydney, what's Business Events Sydney role in the domestic market during COVID, and what insights were gained?
So we, as I said, traditionally we haven't been involved in the domestic market. We launched It's Got to Be Sydney campaign early on in the pandemic to make sure that the business that was out there was attracted to Sydney. We've also facilitated 2 New South Wales Treasury stimulus programs, one called Kickstart, one called Accelerate, which effectively is splitting the tab with event organisers subject to certain conditions. We're in the second round of... we're about to launch, actually, the second round of Accelerate now. And that's designed to take events that haven't contracted yet and incentivise those organisers to sign the contracts so that the business is confirmed in that short to medium term.
Yeah. And there's funding available as well, isn't there, or from Business Events Sydney? I mean, that's attractive.
Yeah, primarily through those stimulus programs. We don't have general funding across the domestic market. We work obviously very closely with the state government around priority sectors for New South Wales, and if there's an event that really ticks the boxes in those priority sectors that we really want to have to Sydney, then definitely we can bring a commercial element to those discussions.
Yeah, and we thank Business Events Sydney for sort of assisting with this conference, of course, because it is a risk, because we don't know where it's going to go ahead, and it's sort of turned out. So, any questions from the audience? No? Sorry, you got one over here. Sorry, we got a roving mic down here. Sorry, you can scream. Or can you just repeat your long question? Can you repeat your long question?
Oh, yeah, it was a long one. It was basically a gripe.
question.
It was a little bit of a gripe at the government for making New South Wales lose a lot of bids over the past pre-COVID, and especially in that time just leading up to COVID. And I know a lot of it was due to the ICC closing, being built, but are the government, New South Wales government, providing more funds to yourselves to bid better, to take these things back from Queensland, take these things back from Melbourne, so we can be the #1 conferencing place in Australia again?
What's wrong with Queensland? Sorry.
So being majority New South Wales government funded, I would say yes, they are doing a great job. But I would say, firstly, there's misconceptions. Sydney is the #1 business events hub in Australia. ICA rankings in Asia Pacific and globally, we're the #1 and have been for a decade. Definitely, it's a very competitive market. Do we have pools of funding to be competitive? Most certainly we do. It's going to be even more competitive than it was pre-COVID. So that's not about splashing cash everywhere. It's about looking at the events that make most sense to be in Sydney, whether that be for a visitor perspective or from a sector development perspective. I don't know, I'm not across the details, but obviously Destination New South Wales are responsible for major events, sporting events and community events. And I know they've made a number of announcements in the last 6 to 12 months of new events coming to Sydney for that calendar moving forward. So we are well supported, it is competitive, and we've got to be really targeted of what we bring into Sydney.
Okay. Any other questions at all? Over here, Martin. Martin's my director of HR. He hires and fires. He's amazing. Been with me 7 years.
Hi, this is a question for Kristian. Hi, Kristian. My name's Eve. I'm from the College of Pathologists, and I was a successful recipient of your domestic funding for this year for our hybrid annual scientific meeting. So first of all, thank you. Secondly, I'd like to actually ask a question, which is, will there be any funds retained for the domestic market, or will your focus just go now back to international meetings? Thank you.
Good to see you, Eve, and I'm glad you had I heard you had a really successful event, so well done. The short answer is we will have more of a role in the domestic market than we did pre-COVID. But again, we have finite resources, finite funding. If that funding was expanded, certainly we would relook at that. We also talk to government and our stakeholders around where we can deliver the most value. At times that's not in the domestic market, and I know a number of cities that are very reliant on domestic business are very active in that market at the moment, particularly in the short term, trying to shore in particularly the larger national events into the city for 22, 23, 24. So we've certainly got a role to play there. We will continue to have a role in the domestic market, but as I said earlier, it won't be a very broad strategy, it'll be a very targeted strategy.
Okay. Any other questions in the room? Ladies and gentlemen, please thank everyone on the panel. It was fantastic. Thank you.